Well, we certainly know the NFL never stops. March Madness, what's that? Like, why would we want to let that have any sort of attention? We're going to take all the news and we're going to make all the trades this year with now Tyreek Hill gone to the Miami Dolphins. Matt, we're going to jump into the details on both of this. But just first and foremost, go home, NFL. You're drunk.
Yeah, I mean, it just feels like now that they have just took a page from TMZ. So that's basically where it feels where they're going here. And I mean, but it's thrilling for the fans. I mean, to see all of this, but it just seems like the whole league has realigned, within the span of like 6 weeks.
Yeah. Bloom. I mean, I guess people have tossed around the word shocking. Yeah. But how shocking was it to see Tyreek Hill traded?
Not totally shocking. I mean, it was shocking in the sense that there's no leaks. There was nothing that really put this on our radar. Nothing like the Davante Adams buying a house in Las Vegas. Nothing like that. However, it makes sense to me reverse engineering this, right? Davante Adams gets a deal and we're watching, again, plate tectonics. This is all really interesting stuff because it shows you where the league is going, okay? Now you have a wide receiver bar reset now up to, and this is one of those agent-driven things, right? There's the original numbers that are reported. Mike Garafolo, alum of 5 Minute Drill, today saying, well, actually, Davante Adams only got about $500,000 more a year than Julio Jones. It's Tyreek Hill's deal up to $25 million that really is resets the market. But look, we already saw the market reset with DJ Moore, Chris Godwin, Mike Williams, all getting $20 million a year. I mean, $20 million a year, guys. I went back and looked like 8 years ago or 9 years ago, like 2013. No quarterback's cap number was over $20 million 9 years ago.
Remember when Calvin Johnson and Dez had the big deals? I think it was 15 a year for wide receivers. Right. And like for years, teams didn't touch that number because they felt that those numbers were a mistake. I was like, what happened?
Guys, I went back and looked 20 years ago. Cecil, you're going to love this because this is one of those trivia questions you could probably get. 20 years ago, I went back and looked at the top cap numbers, the top 5 cap numbers for receivers. You know who they were? Ed McCaffrey, Marvin Harrison, Randy Moss, Rod Smith. The Broncos had 2 of the top 5 cap numbers. The top cap number at wide receiver was $3.8 million. God. Santana Moss at number 5 was like $1.4 million. So, I mean, that was just 20 years ago. It's like real estate, right? I mean, the NFL salaries. I think Ryan Burns, all of our mutual friend, said, yeah, this is how I know the NFL is doing okay. The NFL is doing okay. But this also, the NFL is a cartel, right? And this messes things up for the cartel. When you have foolish actors in the cartel, it messes up the balance for everybody else. I think what Haslam did with Deshaun Watson is going to do this too. Justin Herbert, et cetera, are now looking at Deshaun Watson's contract like, okay, now I know where to start my negotiations. Thanks, Jimmy Haslam. Thanks, Stephen Ross, for now setting, when Deebo Samuel when Justin Jefferson, when Jamar Chase's contracts come up, they're going to want quarterback money. Well, quarterback money from like a few years ago, because quarterbacks are going to want $50 million a year. So we're watching all this reset. And Tyreek Hill saw Davante Adams' deal, Drew Rosenhaus, and said, I want that. And Kansas City, we ain't going to give you that. So Kansas City then could let him play that out, or they can trade him and recoup what they can get for him now. I think that's really what went down. I think it's pretty straightforward, simple stuff. And yes, it makes sense that Tyreek Hill would be the kind of player to say, I don't care. Well, he cares about going to the Dolphins or the Jets, but he doesn't care about leaving Patrick Mahomes, right? Because that's like DJ Moore and his extension. Like, don't you care about the quarterback you play with? Don't you care about the organization you play in? Right? I don't want to sound like a stick in the mud because it's not about loyalty or something like that. But really, I think it's just about knowing where you're going to flourish. Like, what would Allen Robinson say right now? Would he rather have taken less money to play somewhere other than Chicago right now if he could redo it? I hope so. I want to live in a world where that's true, but it's Tyreek Hill. Now, we can get down to Miami, and it's Mike McDaniel and how he's going to leverage the strengths that are very clear now. They're very distinct and clear. Quick hitting, RPOs. Take the decisions out of Tua's hands, really. Just scheme everything with these guys. Is Tyreek Hill that seismic in terms of the gravitational pull he has on a defense that he can create all these advantages. What's Kansas City going to do in the wake of that? If it's that important, is Patrick Mahomes not scary anymore? Is it kryptonite now? So lots of great stories, and let's just wait and see what goes down by the end of today.
Well, let's unpack those stories. And Matt, I'll begin with you. In Kansas City, I had learned, and I did not learn about the Tyreek thing ahead of time, but I had learned there was some disharmony within the walls of Kansas City, and not the stupid, like, whatever, what was that blog or whatever that was like Chiefs reporting nation international production discount store or whatever. I don't know. It had the super long name, stupid name. And then it was like, they were like, Mahomes told his brother and his wife to stay home, and it had all that stuff, right? I don't know if you remember that report. So it wasn't like that, but I did hear, like, you know, the Bieniemy thing keeps coming up again. Like, you got Nagy looking over his shoulder now. So a little bit of disharmony is the best way I could put it from what I've been told around Kansas City. The Hill thing's probably not going to help in terms of chemistry, in terms of the playground football. Now, Pat Mahomes is still a magician. He's a wizard. He can play standard traditional football. But those playground plays, I don't care if you have they got Marcus Valdes-Scantling? Bloom, I just woke up.
No,
so, like,
not yet.
Bloom wouldn't be surprised by that, by the way, Matt. But anyway, like, you know, like, okay, Marcus Valdes-Scantling, we'll talk about the draft in a little bit. But the disharmony that may or may not be there in Kansas City, the loss of Hill, the lack of playground football, Mahomes staple, what does this look like?
Well, I mean, I think that, you know, you look at this and understand that when you pay your quarterback as much money as they did, and then you still have Travis Kelce, and then you still have you have Hill demanding what he did, I'm sure that Hill was disappointed that this happened. I think that probably what's going on is that he asked for it, probably didn't think that he was going to end up traded as a result. But when you play that card, that's what happens. And I think that that's what happened. That's why he seemed like conflicted when it happened, because he knew he basically said bye to one of the 2 to 3 best quarterbacks in the league and broke up the band. And he knows that he's always going to be associated with that. On some level, I know he thinks that. No, we're still not making Mecole Hardman a thing. No, thank goodness.
But Juju,
you know, Juju will be helpful because Travis Kelce is still a mismatch on the outside. You put Juju on the inside, and he can be your Kelce, with Kelce being more of your dynamic presence on the outside. Now they need to get an outside guy. So, you know, hey, man, you know, I've got a podcast. You can check that out, too. And we'll talk more about it here, too. I know. So, but, you know, one of the things that we can say in terms of, like, players, they are also looking at Laviska Shenault. That's another player that I've heard them talking about overnight is someone that's in there. But they're not going to find anybody. There's nobody like Tyreek Hill. The closest person to Tyreek Hill that I've studied is Jalen Waddle, and they're both on the same team. So, you know, for me, the Chiefs are just – Andy Reid has always been someone who can adjust, you know. So in terms of that, you know, I think that the Chiefs certainly take a step down of being the team to beat in the division, but they aren't the team that's going to get beaten in the division either. I mean, they're still in the thick of this for sure. It's just that without Hill, yeah, the onus now is going to be on Mahomes maturing even more. You know, he's going to have to do that. He's going to have to change his style of football. It might actually be the best thing for Mahomes in terms of his growth now, because he will have to go through the adjustment of making even more mature decisions. Now, I'll say this, a lot of those playground throws that he made, it's not so much that he made them because Tyreek Hill somehow, you know, jumped over everybody or outran everybody. Some of them were because Patrick Mahomes saw the player on one side of the field and connected to him, and then he outran everybody.
Right.
So you know, it's not going to change that the way he sees the field. He still sees the field like the magician.
It's going to change that mind meld, though, until he can get on the same page with someone like he was with Tyreek.
And he may never get on the same page with someone the way he was with Tyreek. So, so yeah, that's the big change. But Miami's the Miami is one of the most fascinating things, because you could say, oh, well, Jay Moyer, I saw on Twitter yesterday saying, oh, well, obviously, Jalen Waddle is now the Deebo Samuel for Mike McDaniel's offense. And then here comes Tyreek Hill, so it's great because both of those guys are tough after the catch. Both of those guys can win over you. They can also, outrun the field. And when you think about, Henry Ruggs and Devonta Smith and Jalen Waddle in the same offense with Tua, then you see a lot of what they did. Quick hitters, play action deep. There were a lot of design rollouts where you could do great work that way. Screenplays, RPOs, everything that Bloom mentioned. So it's a fascinating thing. And Miami, as long as that Teron Armstead can be what he's supposed to be, and they can find a tight end who can block like 3/4 the way of Kittle. They got Alec Ingold. They are building that plan where it's like, yeah, we just need, with a running back, we just need speed. Though they got with Edmonds, the guy who can do a little bit more than that, and Mostert can do a little more than that for the 2.5 games he's healthy.
Right. We'll get to the Dolphins in just a little bit. We're going to fully unpack this whole thing, but sticking with Kansas City, Bloom, the discontent, the discord, whatever behind the scenes, how does this thing work now offensively? And Matt brought it up with Andy Reid. Well, with Andy Reid, they're always going to be about right there. And Matt, you'll remember this because you love the guy, Brian Westbrook. They don't have their Brian Westbrook. Well, I know they're looking at Ronald Jones. They haven't signed him yet, right? Again, I just woke up. But like, okay, you can go get Ronald Jones. You drafted Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but you don't have your Brian Westbrook. And Reid's offenses were always known as good. Not great. I might make Jason Wood mad with that statement, but like, you had this ceiling with Andy Reid until he got Mahomes and that magic that Mahomes had with Tyreek Hill. Well, what now?
I'm not that concerned, although it's on some different players' shoulders, like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, like Juju Smith-Schuster, like Mecole Hardman. I'm not saying Mecole Hardman's going to happen for fantasy, but some of the same things Matt was talking about with Miami, where you can stretch a defense horizontally, not just vertically. Mecole Hardman can absolutely do that tactically. I mean, he's a player that forces you to account for his speed. And I saw them using Hardman, and Hardman was more successful on those plays, jet sweeps and things like that, getting him into play. And yeah, he can run a go route off of play action, and at the very least give you that deep threat that can clear the back line of the defense. But they've got players. Narco News, one of my favorite dudes, asking a very relevant question, saying, who would Matt Waldman take in the 2022 draft for the Chiefs? Which is a question you can look at, like Jameson Williams, right? Everyone's going to say Jameson Williams. Okay, I mean, yeah, why not? I mean, it makes sense to me. But there's also an idea of what archetypes. But Matt hit on the most important thing, which is that the chemistry. And that's something that takes time. And that's something that Mecole Hardman has demonstrated doesn't happen. And they did lose DeMarcus Robinson, and they did lose Byron Pringle. So there are players that do have that chemistry with Mahomes that are sometimes, when a play is outside of structure, that third or fourth option that can be in the right place at the right time. So there is going to be, I think Noah Gray is another interesting player. Remember, they love him. So maybe this could be signaling more 2 tight end sets. What are we talking about here, guys? Flexibility, offensive coaches, scheme, play design, being willing to use what they have and make that work. So I think that we saw a lot of evidence that Kansas City can evolve within a season. It wasn't like Tyreek Hill was just getting deep on 70-yard bombs, even when the offense did come online. It was still patience. It was still nickel diming, paper cutting defenses to death. So that's not going to change. And I expect that they'll be able to overcome this. I think that Green Bay is going to be able to overcome Adams too, even more clearly. So I think what's odd here, guys, the paradox of this is that while these receivers are getting big trade compensation in terms of draft pick, big contracts, I think what we're going to see in the wake is they're not as important as the contracts and trade compensation would lead you to believe.
So much to go on in the National Football League, and you love it. Now, with the Visca thing, may I rant, please? Now, I retweeted this, I don't know, a week ago, and it wasn't Michael Fabiano who tweeted it. I had a guest on that said something about like Visca's not a wide receiver. LaVisca's not a wide receiver, because if you don't like him, you say LaVisca, and if you like him, you say Visca, and people get mad. Stop saying Visca. Well, I've known him since he was a freshman. He's Visca to me. Anyway, the whole notion, and again, this, and I didn't blame Michael in my tweet because he's like a godfather in fantasy football, right? And we all look up to him and appreciate him, and all those sorts of things. Like he's been around forever. He's gotten it done the right way. He's been kind in what he does. I can't say that for all the OG fantasy football guys. There are some out there. Hell, there's some that I got into this industry because I thought they were awful, that are still kicking around somewhere, changing websites or whatever. So that's not Michael Fabiano. And again, it was not Michael that said this. He had a guest on, and then whoever the guest was, and I apologize, I don't know who it was. How many times do you hear me say that, Bloom? You're like, so-and-so said this. I was like, don't know him. Anyway, he said LaVisca's not a wide receiver, and I was like, oh my God. Like, seriously. Visca was always like a smaller Julio Jones that you could use as a Cordero Patterson or a Deebo Samuel if you were creative enough. If you actually thought of, okay, he's not a wide receiver. You're actually right, Mr. Person I don't know that was on Michael Fabiano's show. You're right. He's not a wide receiver. He could be so much more than that. Now, he's got durability concerns. The day is long, so you got to worry about that. But when healthy, this kid can make plays, big-time plays, and not because Suyu didn't play anybody. No, he played against some tough competition at Colorado, and going to the Chiefs, leaving the doldrums of the Jaguars, going from Trevor Lawrence to Patrick Mahomes. Matt, if there's one thing to get me charged up this morning, it's not my coffee. It's the idea of Visca playing with the Chiefs.
Yeah, because I mean, it's funny to hear that someone said he's not a wide receiver. I mean, that just kind of sounds like that. We don't do podcasts, so I mean, right. It's a kind of a crazy thing. He's a very good route runner, actually, and someone who
when someone says that, I'm like, oh, they've never watched him before. Like, and again, I don't know who it was. Michael just had some guest on, but I was like, this guy doesn't know what he's looking at.
They were like me back in 2001, watching like Steven Jackson at Colorado and thinking, I'm going to scout some players, and then waking up with my cat on my chest and the game being like 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter. And I saw like 4 plays, so that's basically what that's about. But yeah, having Shenault would be a fantastic add for them schematically, but I want to answer the draft question if you guys don't mind in terms of that. I think that there are, Jameson Williams, I tweeted out that idea and just said, I don't know if that's really going to be likely, but it certainly sounds fun. Chris Olave would be better than most, I think, in terms of wherever you put him, but it's more of a traditional wide receiver and what he could do, because he could play all 3 positions for you if you need him to. And he's a terrific route runner, steady hands, great tracking ability. He's the type of guy that could form chemistry with Patrick Mahomes very quickly, but not offer you that Swiss Army knife upside. There's 3 guys who could. And they're all small frame, big game guys. And that's the problem, is like, are you okay with the 5'8", 170-ish pound guy who might not be tall enough to ride the Sunday roller coaster?
And doesn't that describe this whole wide receiver class, Matt, where it's like boom bust for everybody?
It's
like, it could be a great class if these guys hit, and it could be like, why were they taking those tiny guys?
Exactly.
5 years from now.
Exactly. The tiny guys or the Equinemius St. Brown clones, that's how they could turn out, in some of these. So, one of those guys is Calvin Austin of Memphis. Calvin Austin, to me, people talk about Wan'Dale Robinson, and he's fantastic, and he gets the most billing, but everyone knows about Wan'Dale Robinson. You can turn on any 3 and 4 letter word network, and they're going to basically have that on there. But when you take a guy like Calvin Austin, who's name grown during the Senior Bowl, the thing that can be unlocked with him, unlike the other 2 that I'm going to mention, well, at least unlock that Wan'Dale Robinson can't do, is he actually understands how to adjust to a football in the air and win on the outside as a deep threat. So if you don't draft him for this, but you draft him knowing that maybe when you get him into a camp, you have some reps where he's outside and see how he fares against your starting corners. Can you have him win on back shoulders? Can you have him win deep in contested situations? And does he do it fairly easily? If he does, now you've just gotten a guy that you can do a little bit of the Tyreek Hill thing with, because he's an unbelievable track athlete still. And he's someone who can run those jet sweeps for you with maturity and dynamic ability. And he's a route runner who can maybe play outside if he plays big enough. The second guy I would add who you can get later and take that chance on, if you're like, we're gonna get somebody in free agency, but let's add somebody in case those guys flop, and we can get some special teams ability. We might even find that we stumbled on a pocket Darren Sproles, which sounds like you might want to call him Nano Sproles at this point, would be is Khalil Pimpleton out of Central Michigan. Khalil Pimpleton, who is one of the leading punt returners in the nation. I'm sure someone could dig something up where I've compared some aspect of somebody's play to Barry Sanders, but I can't remember really ever doing that, because I don't take that very lightly. It's secret
territory. You don't like to go into that territory.
Yeah, even Tariq Cohen, I didn't give that Sanders thing to, when a lot of people were like, he's got that. I don't think I did, but Khalil Pimpleton has some moves when he plays in traffic that the elusiveness, he veers a little bit into that territory, even as a wide receiver when they use him on jet sweeps. I think he could be, let's put it this way, a smaller upscale version of Danny Woodhead in that respect, and someone who actually, he made the most difficult catch I saw on tape this year. In college, it was an unbelievable sideline catch that he can go up and win the ball too. But when he's pretty much on par with the explosive metrics you see with Calvin Austin, who is on paper right now, based on who got timed, the most explosive receiver in the draft. So if Khalil Pimpleton's there, and the Patriots worked him out in the blizzard, literally outside this weekend, and he fared pretty darn well. I think he's going to be a New England Patriot, but I could definitely see him in Kansas City as a late, mid to late round guy who suddenly we're talking about in a way that could give you a little bit of backfield, can give you a little bit of those types of skills. But, those are four guys that I think give you a range of what the Chiefs could be looking for, knowing that we really don't know.
I think he could wind up in Vegas. We'll talk about it later. Sigmund, the Chiefs' best route, with their stockpile of draft picks, with the Visca inquiry, what's their best route, in your opinion, to add talent? Not Tyreek Hill. They're not going to add a Tyreek Hill, but to make up for what they lost.
Yeah, well, what they need quite directly, you can be very linear about this, run after catch threat and speed. That's why Jameson Williams comes up. And I think, I guess, don't ask Patrick Mahomes after Clyde Edwards-Helaire hasn't exactly been that impactful going on that report. I mean, and you just need to add those dimensions. So I think that some of the things we're hearing, Ronald Jones can add an element to their running game that they don't have right now. Laviska Shenault, and the conversation about different things you can do with him. He's a wide receiver. He's not a wide receiver. Look, all Jacksonville players, after all the stuff that we saw confirmed about Urban Meyer, I mean, I would definitely
Who's this 99 guy?
Yeah.
He said that about Aaron Donald. What a moron.
According to some of the people covering the team, he didn't even know who some of his own players were. I'm not kidding. I mean, it's a reality surpasses parody.
The CBS parody that they did is fantastic. It's worth a watch because they have a guy play him who's like, "Who's this James Robinson guy? We need to get him." Hey James, why did I draft a running back? Right. I mean that. Yeah.
It's even the most uncharitable depictions of what you thought was happening. It was worse than that. It was absolutely worse than that. And that's a whole thing that makes me want to see if you want me to hear me rant. Let's all make a pact that when we work for people like Urban Meyer, we speak up even if it means we lose our jobs. Something like that. so that they can't prosper. I mean, I don't want to live in a world where Urban Meyer prospers, Anyway,
He's
so
prospered for too long.
yeah, all the Urban Meyer for too long. So Andy Reid's already thinking this way. Bringing in Josh Gordon. I mean, these kinds of things. I
The
think
Corey Coleman thing, I was like, wait a
Corey
second.
Coleman.
Corey
Yeah.
Coleman? Like, is there another Corey Coleman that I'm not familiar with?
But I mean,
no, it's the Corey Coleman. Like, okay.
Yeah, because guys not sticking around the league or sticking with teams doesn't mean they can't play. And there's a few organizations that are willing to try to find that. And I think that's a good route for this team right now. And I think that the Chiefs showed incredible resilience and resourcefulness last year. The way that they changed. Patrick Mahomes did too. We would have been talking about them probably winning a Super Bowl if they hadn't collapsed in the second half against the Bengals. I think they probably would have beaten the Rams. I certainly think they would have stood up better under the pressure and allowed less pressure. I mean, look at the way they responded to their offensive line problems coming out of the Super Bowl against Tampa. How effective can you? I mean, this team, I think they know what to do in the face of these things. I think it's with a very calm. I don't think this was a panic move. I don't think this was a move. Green Bay, like anytime Aaron Rodgers leaving would come up, you could see that there was almost like watching some of these different officials that are reporting to Putin, right? They're like trembling, like scared, like, oh, I don't even want to think about what's going to happen if we don't have Aaron Rodgers. I don't think the Chiefs feel this way about the Tyreek Hill deal. They were just like, okay, given this proposition, this is the right answer for us. Good luck.
Well, there's hubris in that building. I'll say that. And I have friends in that building, but they definitely they think their stuff doesn't stink. They might be a little
when you host 4 straight AFC title games, I get it.
It's true. That's true. Yeah. But what does Joe always say? Things change pretty quickly around here. And Russell Wilson's in division, and what the Raiders have done, and the Chargers, as long as everyone had a Heimlich clause in their contract, like AFC West is brutal. So you can sit on top of your mountain, Kansas City, rightfully so.
Nobody's picking Denver, which makes me laugh because to me, they're the most obvious choice. So I don't get, I mean, maybe nobody outside of Denver is picking Denver, but I can't see how you look at Russell Wilson and say he's behind Justin Herbert in terms of proven quarterbacks.
Time Russell Wilson was top 10 in passing attempts, he led the league in passing touchdowns.
Yeah.
Nathaniel Hackett's going to let it fly.
Yeah.
Mike McDaniel's going to see what Tua can do. I mean, that's what this is all about. I mean, and if you're Tua, you have to love this sort of shot. And the Tua hate, you thought I had a rant for the Visca hate, but the Tua hate is so misguided, right? Because there's a lot of people that have outlets that don't know football that talk about football. And they see Tua and they're like, well, I didn't see it. And, hot take. He doesn't have it. Are you really watching? I saw people talking about his deep passing. When he gets the chance, and he had the second fewest deep passing attempts behind only Daniel Jones last year. But when he gets the chance, Matt, he's actually one of the best deep passers in the league. Do you go back to Alabama? You mentioned the group of weapons that he had for the Crimson Tide. So I'm not saying Tua's the answer or the greatest ever or whatever, but I know Mike McDaniel. I know what he's going to set up for Tua. We all knew they're going to run the hell out of the ball. Now with Tyreek Hill there and Jalen Waddle and Gesicki and Edmonds, like let's step through this, because this Hill addition, and from a fantasy lens, he goes from like an elite wide receiver to a wide receiver 1. He goes from 1,200 yards to 1,000 yards, 1,200 to 1,100, whatever it is. He goes from 12 touchdowns to 7 touchdowns. Okay, so there is a difference there. But let's talk about this offense and what it means for Tua, because this is a lot of times new coaches will show up and be like, nah, that's the old guy's guy. That's not my guy. I don't have to do anything. I'll do a little for him, but when he fails, I'm getting rid of his ass. Now, sorry, Joe, with these additions for Tua, it's full support of Tua. I mean, it truly is on him this year.
And I think people would argue back that, well, they got Teddy Bridgewater as a potential bridge to the next quarterback if this doesn't quite work out. That's what some people would argue. But at the same time, I'm more with you, Cecil, that, when you look at what Tua is capable of, if he doesn't get offensive scheme change fatigue, which I think can probably happen for a young quarterback early in their career, if he doesn't get that, then and he plays to what he's capable of early, then yes, this team could be a playoff team. The defense is promising, and when you look at what they have on offense now, we forgot that Tyreek Hill basically played a Jarvis Landry role last year. They didn't unlock him. They just said, let's get him the ball as much as we can, because Mike Gesicki is a nice ball adjusting, player who's, kind of a rebounder who can work up the seam, but he's not a dynamic tight end, even though his combine makes it look like that. If you actually just watch him with your eyes as opposed to looking at the spreadsheet, you will see that this guy has some limitations.
That's why his combine was so surprising to me, because I was like, wait a second, Mike Gesicki from Penn State?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Because he didn't show that on film.
I think they need to check the pants that he wears in football, because maybe there's some maybe he bought some from a brand that they make him with concrete, because concrete like basically in the inseam, because I think his ability to move is somewhat restricted compared to what we saw, maybe before that. But when you see, he may need that too, but that's, Diego. So, but at the same time, when you talk about what Miami has to offer with that inside-outside zone, it's going to enhance the play action even more, because Myles Gaskin was a nice runner in terms of how he saw the field, but he's not a threat to take it all the way on the outside. He's not a threat that when he makes the cutback that he might gain 50 yards as opposed to gain 15. And so while he gets you those consistent gains, he wasn't going to blow it out of the box, the way that these guys could. And that's going to help Tua with the play action game even more. And especially with the fact that teams can't double Tyreek without the fear of God when Jalen Waddle comes on there, because you're going to see just how good Jalen Waddle can be now that Tyreek Hill is in this offense, because they're going to send Waddle deep, and I think he adjusts to the ball better than Tyreek Hill does on deep routes. And so you're going to, with Tua, his ability to run play action, some of the quick hitting plays that they're going to run, like Bloom said, with the RPOs, you have Edmonds as your player who can leak out of the backfield and make plays as a receiver. This team suddenly becomes a lot better, whether Devontae Parker's in the equation or not. If they trade Parker, fine. They'll probably be able to add a third option to that receiving core if they want, or go after another tight end if they feel like that they need someone who can be a little bit more dynamic. Because Durham Smythe, to me, if he's still on that team, I haven't checked.
He is. 2 years, $8 million.
Yeah. Durham Smythe is an underrated tight end. He's not someone that you would put at the top of fantasy boards, in terms of his athletic ability, but he's a superior route runner to Gesicki. He makes tough catches, and he's a better blocker. So if they decided that they wanted to kind of go with a more all-around guy, you might see more Smythe in there in 2 tight end sets. Or you might see them draft a tight end if they can get that Colorado State kid. Maybe that might be that might not be a bad thing.
Going to be at his pro day next week for Trey McBride.
There you go, Trey McBride. If you can get him as your, that might be your closest bet to a George Kittle type of player in this particular class in terms of all around skills. Or if you want to go a little smaller, I would say I just watched some more Jake Ferguson the other night out of Wisconsin, who's not unbelievably fast, but he's very polished and he can block. And he's someone that will make people miss and give you a little bit, there's no concrete in his inseam. So I'll just put it to you that way. He can.
And how about a Delaney Walker? I got to throw in some love, and I'm going to hack his name. Matt, help me out. Maryland, Chigozium Okonkwo.
Oh, Chig. Yeah. Chig, he might not be bad either. So, and
I see Delaney Walker. Saw him at the Shrine Bowl. Shrine Bowl had some great talent, man.
Yeah, we'll be there next year.
All right. All right.
Yeah.
Sig, let's talk about it,
Yeah.
man. Miami, Mike McDaniel. This is really exciting for Dolphins fans because the AFC as a conference is going to be so very competitive. And so many teams could just, well, it's the Bills' turn. We're just not there. Or, the Patriots will be there, whatever. Like, no, Miami making a big statement.
Yeah, it's been a crazy few years for this organization, right? I mean, Brian Flores comes in and they're bottoming out, and it's kind of like last year's Texans or Lions, where they're not even really supposed to compete, and they compete so well by the end of the year that you're really excited about what the future brings. They're supposed to tank for Tua. They still pick number 5. They still get Tua. It works out. They have Ryan Fitzpatrick restore some pride to this team, and they get Tua, and they help blow up the Death Star in New England, right? And then things don't go so well for Tua. A lot of people talk about giving up on Tua or going after Deshaun Watson, right? Last year, at times, there were people that would have said definitively, oh, Watson's going to be a Dolphin. Just give it time. He's going to be a Dolphin. Now it's Tua. Flores is suing the NFL, and now, I don't know, have we even mentioned that the Steelers hired him? Which is pretty cool. Anyway, so now Tua, you wait around long enough, and he's got Tyreek Hill. They trade up for Jalen Waddle. Oops, own goal. They gave up an extra first rounder. Well, actually, Jalen Waddle's looking like that comparison where you bring, like, it's not quite Burrow and Chase because that's special chemistry. But the idea is you look at what made the guy successful in college. Because I was looking at a bunch of Matt Ryan stuff earlier today, just reflecting on his career with Atlanta and remembering that Matt Ryan, the prospect, the current draft Twitter would have hated him because he didn't have anything around him and his numbers looked bad and he didn't really have any tools to hang his hat on. He was just accurate. He would hang in against the rush and make the throw. He could shoulder the offense.
Just that.
Yeah, just that. But Tua was surrounded by those names that Matt was reciting. So he looked a lot more spectacular in his strengths. But in Miami, he wasn't surrounded by that. Now we're getting closer to that. It's all on Mike McDaniel. And that's the other side of this, right? Brian Flores gets fired, sues the league, outs Stephen Ross, maybe, attempting to fix games. Pretty weighty stuff. But they get Mike McDaniel, who sees you've been hinting at for years. If you want to know who the genius is in San Francisco, it's not Kyle Shanahan. Wasn't Matt LaFleur. No, Mike LaFleur. So now, Mike McDaniel, here's your first assignment. Here's the pieces in the box. What can you make out of it? And Matt talked about Deebo Samuel. Well, what can you do? What's the strength of the 49ers offense? Same formation, same personnel, different things happen out of it. You're prepared for one thing and they can do something else. It looks exactly the same. Well, imagine if you have 2 Deebo Samuels, where each of them can do all the different things. Where you have to account for that again, and two-dimensionally horizontally, and they both are deep threats. And Gesicki, and, Neil Driscoll just said, look out for Devontae Parker trade. He's only like $6 million a year, so I could see that. Because they went out and got Cedric Wilson. They like Cedric Wilson, underrated player. So you have your number 3. You have Gesicki ripping the seam or otherwise creating mismatches. The offensive line movement, Matt mentioned Tron Armstead. So there's your guy. You need him to stay healthy because they haven't really done much to address the line. Liam Eichenberg, Austin Jackson, these picks have not worked out. Solomon Kinley's solid. We'll see about Robert Hunt. But it hasn't worked out. They haven't. On the defensive side, though, as Matt points out, they brought back Emmanuel Ogbah, very underrated. Jalen Phillips looks like he's going to be a hit as a pick. They still have the best cornerback combo in the league, Xavier Howard and Byron Jones. Javon Holland looks like he's a player as that playmaker in the back of that defense. They've got a lot, and the problem is, how do you even pick 7 playoff teams in the AFC at this point?
Yeah, and
4 from the AFC West, and then 3 divisions.
I mean, one thing I have to ask though is, Teron Armstead. I look at this. They need the most important part of the 49ers offense, if you ask me, isn't all the stuff that we just, all the skill players. It's Trent Williams, it's George Kittle, and it's Kyle Juszczyk.
Because they can dig them out.
Yeah, they can dig them out. They set the edge better than anybody in the league because when Elijah Mitchell can be a 900-yard runner based on his footwork and his vision, that tells you a lot. And I would say Teron Armstead, certainly he's not 1-to-1 with Trent Williams, but he can be very good.
Yeah.
They don't have the tight end yet, so I think they're going to try and look for one in the draft. You can give you at least Kittle as a blocker, or at least somewhere in the zip code of that, and then Ingold can be good enough, I think, as a blocker to help out there too. But that's, like you said, Kinley's might be the only guy that, other than Armstead, who can really give you that skill in the run game on the level that they need it.
Okay, Bloom, we have some breaking news during this show. Now, you may be watching at a later date or listening at a later time on the Audible feed. We certainly appreciate everyone for subscribing to us, Spotify, Apple Music, however you may enjoy your podcasts. We are there for you. But I was going to get into the Odell Beckham thing, because Odell Beckham's now considering a return to Cleveland. But Bloom, we have some breaking news about the grand jury in Texas considering charges against Deshaun Watson. The decision is going to be made by Friday. Guess who's talking to the Cleveland media on Friday? Scheduled to Deshaun Watson. Yeah. So what?
Yeah, well, see, again, we talked about this before we went on the air. I talked about it with John Daigle on the couch this week. When the Deshaun Watson stuff went down, our football media colleagues, for the most part, were breathless to report it as a big football story. And unfortunately, there was a moment I hope, it seems like Adam Schefter would like to take back, whenever he's like, dude, Deshaun Watson was okay with this police investigating because he knew the truth would come out. No bill, and anybody who's familiar with grand jury proceedings can tell you, like, no bill doesn't mean innocent. It just means no bill. And the Browns, look, was the Matt Ryan trade directly downstream from Deshaun Watson? Would Matt Ryan still be an Atlanta Falcon today if they didn't pursue Deshaun Watson? I don't know, but it seems like it leaves hurt feelings in its wake. Look at Baker Mayfield. Lots of people down here in New Orleans, I know, breathe a big sigh of relief, because it creates, look, we're Steelers fans, see, Ben Roethlisberger, right? It creates these moral conflicts, and I think it at least was noted that it wasn't noted in the presentation of this. And now, well, it's still there. It didn't go away just because the grand jury no-billed him. There's more to it. And another theme in my show on the couch this week was bad decisions beget bad decisions. And the Browns, for all the flailing and all of the resources they've thrown and all the different approaches they've tried and all the different big brain people they bring in, they still somehow end up back at the same place. Right?
Starts at the top, Flying J.
Yeah. So, and why, and look, even the decision, maybe the universe was going to let the Browns off the hook whenever it was reported that Watson said no, and they came and said, how about we give you $240 million guaranteed for 5 years? How about that? And he's like, well, maybe I would reconsider. Is that going to go down as a brilliant last-second move, or pulling defeat from the jaws of victory? It's yet to be seen. But I think the other thing is, and I mean, Watson, on a play-to-play basis, statistically, or even showing the kinds of stuff that makes you excel as an NFL quarterback, yes. But what did he accomplish in Houston on a team basis? Now, you might say that's Bill O'Brien or whatever, but it's still, it's a massive, massive thing. And I brought up Antonio Brown on the couch this week because it seemed like there was a stage of Antonio Brown's career where he was kind of a curse. Like whatever roster he was on was going to have some sort of a bad outcome brought upon them. And he was like a free radical, a cancer, as they say. I don't know. I'm not saying this applies to Deshaun Watson yet, but I think that the fact that there hasn't even been a few days pass, a week, for Cleveland to start to absorb this. How did the Odell Beckham thing go? You remember the video of the kid like running around screaming, like, we got Odell, we got Odell, we got Odell, right? Like, how bright was the future on that day, and where did it actually end up? They released him. So we'll see.
And now he might come back, Matt.
Yeah, which I wouldn't mind, because I think that just tells you, if I think that let's say the Browns picked Matt Ryan. Maybe that was who they really wanted. Let's just hypothetically do that and remove Deshaun Watson from this whole equation right now to talk about Odell.
Okay.
If we were to do that and say Matt Ryan was a Cleveland Brown, which I'm still trying to, like, in my denial, say that that's really what happened, but everyone else is crazy. I don't know what they're seeing on Twitter. But if he were a Cleveland Brown and Odell Beckham were to come back, it would just be it's just a statement about they got a better quarterback who was an adult in the room. And so, and I think that, when Odell was kind of that uncomfortable person who made the call that they did not want to have an Urban Meyer leading their room, and he got vilified for it. And I think the way he did it was probably childlike. If he had his dad be the one to, like, leak that stuff out there. But he was basically, I think they were basically trying to find a way to say, look, it's not working. He doesn't work. He's not a good quarterback for the NFL. He was a great quarterback in college, did great work at Oklahoma, but he can't be here. We put training wheels on this offense and he still can't get it done. So this is, I think, him saying that he'd be willing to come back to Cleveland. I think that also tells you that there's an emotional shift in Cleveland that says we have identified who the problem is. And that's why and it wasn't Odell. And so that's, to me, I'm totally, if I were as a football fan, as a someone who's been a Cleveland Browns fan, I don't even know what to say about Deshaun Watson. So I'm not, because I've got too much stuff going on right now that I haven't even processed, what that means to me.
1 week from the RSP day.
Yeah. So I haven't really processed, the Deshaun Watson thing, but I will say that if it were Matt Ryan and Odell Beckham wanted to come back, I would say absolutely, not without a shadow of a doubt. Did we need to get rid of Jarvis Landry too? I mean, at this point, no. It would be because, with a guy like Beckham too, he helps that offense in so many different ways, especially if the quarterback can identify what's open and what's not and throw the ball with pinpoint accuracy on the routes that that they've identified he should be good at. So that's Cleveland's a story that has far from ended in terms of the impact of this Watson trade. And it's tough because I'll just say this as a fan with it of the Browns for a while, is that one of the teams ended up with the hot potato, but there were several of them that wanted it. So does that really just, we can put all our ire on Cleveland and for making the decision or winning it, but there were several in hot pursuit, and that should tell us a lot about the league. But the thoughts range from all sorts of things that I just can't piece together in a way that would be worthwhile to do on a show right now. So maybe in a few weeks I'll have a little more clarity.
You get all hot and bothered over something that's bad for you, and then the doctor is using a Q-tip on you. Anyway,
no thanks.
It is the Audible Live. Let's stay away from that one, Bloom. Let's talk about Julio Jones going to the Colts.
Yeah, why not? Why not, right? Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, they have chemistry. They can finish each other's sentences.
Doesn't it seem like it almost is just gonna happen?
Well, why would, I mean, Julio has nothing to lose now. It's hopefully for him, he's not playing football to make any more money. He's playing football to do something that's fun for him. And I would imagine playing with Matt Ryan is still fun for him. And there's an opening there. Wouldn't Julio be such an excellent player for Michael Pittman to emulate, to watch in the building? And look, the Colts, and there's so much to sift through here, guys. This Colts team should be better than the Rivers Colts team, right? And that team went to Buffalo in the wild card round and played Buffalo pretty tough. Yeah. So these Matt Eberflus, we'll see about the defense. But they might have like a faux good defense. But if they have Matt Ryan and they have Jonathan Taylor, so again in the background here, Mike Clay, death taxes and Mike Clay. That's my Mike Clay saying. Mike Clay posted how the ADOT continues to go down in the NFL. That's the trend, right? Smaller, quicker wide receivers. Matt was just talking about this. Maybe they don't have the BMI that you want, but the league's operating differently. Too high. Someone else jumped in. Can't remember his handle. It goes by Football and Crab Cakes. That too high safety usage is shooting through the roof over the last 4 years.
Drop 8.
Drop 8, right?
Jonathan Taylor, baby.
Jonathan Taylor. Boom. Boom.
Yeah.
Boom.
Have fun with that in the playoffs. Jonathan
Exactly.
Taylor in that offensive line.
Exactly.
Javonte Williams.
With a competent quarterback.
Yeah. So why not? But again, do the brain teaser, right? Buffalo's in, okay? There's a team from the AFC South, Tennessee or Indy, that's in. That's 2. So we get 5 more out of, now Miami's in the conversation, the other team from the AFC South, 3 teams from the AFC North, Cleveland, Cincy, Baltimore, and all 4 teams. So some of these teams are staying home. Some of Derrick Henry staying home, and at least one's going to be surprising. At least one is going to be a Patrick Mahomes or a Joe Burrow, or I don't want to say Buffalo because getting Von Miller. Buffalo would really, the way teams have acted this year, guys. It's almost like they got a memo that this is going to be the last NFL season. So
I was going to say this is going to be the last Super Bowl ever. Go get it.
Yeah.
Or something's coming down the pike to destroy this game. Anyway,
which one, Cease? Which thing?
I know exactly. You don't want to know how the sausage is made, people. Just enjoy your football, drink your beer, eat your nachos, and football.
Vince McMahon is laughing somewhere.
There's XFL.
True to life. True to life.
Yeah. Well, let's not talk about the XFL, Matt. Let's talk about the RSP. RSP Day is a week away, baby. Let's talk about it, man.
Well, yeah. If I appreciate that. It's in year 17, and I am wrapping up some final viewings of tight ends this week, today and tomorrow, and then I'll write the chapter, send it off to have a team of some excellent folks editing it, and put it together. So it should be ready April 1st, as it has been pretty much every year. And what you get with it, it's going to be probably 165, 170 prospects at quarterback, running back, wide receiver. And I take you through the process of how I do this. That's what makes it such a big document, is that I'm transparent about my evaluation process, and I show you what an evaluation process looks like when it's based on, training that I got many years ago on what a good standard for evaluating talent looks like. And then applying it to football and then building on it over the years. And it just continues to grow. But you get, breakdowns of all the different types of skill criteria that I look at and who ranked highly. I break it down by depth of talent and breadth of talent. Breadth of talent is kind of like resume bullet points. You see what a player can do, but then the depth of talent is how well they do it. So you kind of get an idea of potential versus reality in the given moment of what their skills look like. It's a very analytical piece of work, using film insights to track everything. And I think that's what people always joke, because I've had people say, "Oh, you're a film guy," and then I have someone like Dwayne McFarland at PFF go, "People don't realize that you're like an analytics guy who actually studies film." And I would say maybe not to the analytics degree of an Adam Harstead or a Chase Stewart, but yeah, I'm taking subjective insights and trying to objectify them in terms of how I define and weight things and provide transparency and clarity to it. And you get a chance to really see, how I view these players in terms of their techniques, their concepts, their athletic ability, and how that all fits together. But teasing some of those things out so that you can see what the levers are to be able to look at someone and go, this David Johnson guy, I have him ranked 9th, but I'm going to explain to you why I hate rankings that are linear, but also tell you that here's his skills. And if he went to a team like the Colts or the Arizona Cardinals, he could wind up being a Pro Bowl player because of the offensive fit that he's in. So, or last year when you make, the biggest mistake I made last year would be Trey Sermon, not from the standpoint of talent, but from the standpoint of fit, because in the pre-draft, I wrote the worst case scenario of where he could fit would be the San Francisco 49ers because of the way that they play and what they would like to do with their personnel. And then when they traded up to get him and into the round that they got him, I ignored the Jimmy Williams thing and thought, maybe this is going to be a good thing. Maybe they really are going to use him as their lead back. And it turns out that they were just throwing darts at a wall to look for who's the fastest guy they could get. And they then wound up with Mitchell and used his speed. But you get a chance to see those types of things with the players, like what the different levers are. So you get the pre-draft April 1st. And then you get the post-draft after that, as well as a newsletter that comes out throughout the year that updates you with rankings information and thoughts on the 2023 draft class, and as well as updated thoughts on the 2022 guys in terms of what's going on with them and how I think that fits for their long-term future.
RSP Day coming out April 1st. Matt Waldman, RSP.com. Sigmund Bloom. Final thoughts from another crazy week. I would on a personal note, and I'll be at a couple of pro days next week in Laramie and Fort Collins, but I'm like, hey, NFL, can you just, can we coast a little bit here? You don't need the foot on the gas all the time, right?
Right.
Okay, but final thoughts.
Yeah, just another thing. Others have said this, but it deserves to be said. The player empowerment era is here. Players are in control of their destiny now. Tyreek Hill didn't even have a no trade clause, although I would imagine no trade clauses are going to become standard in top of the market contracts now. And I think that while on one hand it's exciting in so much as it creates new things for us to analyze and it keeps the attention. Again, football's king. At a time when so many other sports are peaking in their calendar, football's 6 months away from games, and that's all people want to talk about because it is fascinating to consider all these things. But you do see guys now, a true have and have-nots kind of setup. Parody, Pete Rozell's rolling in his grave, right? I mean, there are teams that you can just say, Houston, Jacksonville, Pittsburgh, the Jets, New England. Yeah, New England. These teams have no chance this year. These have no chance. To start playing for next year, manage your roster. Look at New England in free agency this year. They're just preserving their comp picks and waiting because they know they can't compete this year. Even in the NFC, it's kind of shaken out like that. Like, how many teams can credibly represent the Super Bowl in the NFC? Tampa, Green Bay, Dallas. Of course, the Rams could return. We'll see about San Francisco and Arizona. We'll see about Minnesota. That's it. That's the end of the list. So is that good? Is that going to be good for, how's that going to change fantasy when there's so many more lopsided matchups? There's a lot to parse here, as the thing that makes this league so worth immersing yourself in year after year is it's never the same. And it's getting more never the same every year.
It's the craziest year ever, said every year since 2006.
And they still got to beat Tom, probably.
Right.
Tommy Brady. Maybe that's why everyone got the memo, Bloom, right? Like, hey, you got one more year of Brady, and then this league's done. Honestly, I can't believe, and just on a quick side note, I can't believe, like, during the lifetime of this show, we've seen the popularity of the NFL just, like, quadruple or whatever.
Well, like the wide receiver salaries. It's exactly the same as those salaries.
Well, draft stuff in itself was like just kind of this fringe thing with the NFL. Like, oh, by the way, when we got started,
right?
And now it's like everybody wants to be in on that stuff.
Well, we always talk about Draft Guys TV being like, a few years ahead of its time. It was probably decades ahead of its time.
Yeah, honestly. It was.
Honestly.
It was. I thought it was going to be huge, but then again, I
don't know why someone's not doing it right now. Honestly.
Yeah.
It's coming.
I mean, it's because everyone's going to the Senior Bowl and taking selfies. Hey, look, I'm at the Senior Bowl, everybody. Hey, barbecue. Like, go for the work. Go for the work. Don't get me started. Anyway, that's a wrap for today's program. We appreciate each and every one of you there for watching, for listening. I appreciate learning to speak the English language. He is Matt Waldman, RSP Day, April 1st, at Matt Waldman on Twitter. Sigmund Bloom, officially awesome, at Sigmund Bloom. I'm at Cecil Lammey saying, day's still punching, but we got you, and we appreciate you all. So thank you. Love you. Stay tuned. And as always, stay frosty.